Who has the Dolphin call us?
It's a Star Trek communicator.
Oh, I thought it was a Dolphin. Tim's on the phone.
Try to buy you up, say it's for the good of man. Don't even try to see if I play the same game. I give you all I got, I give you all you want. I give you all I got, I give you all you want. I give you all I got, I give you all you want. I give you all I got, you won't want no more when I get through with you.
Welcome to Atlas Balked, a weekly chronicle concerning the mundane, weird, and maybe even sometimes dramatic happenings of a simple fantasy baseball league. This podcast captures the thoughts and musings of Greg, Joe, Jack, and Tim, 4 of the 10 owners in the league. This is episode 21, entitled Ice Cream or Brownie. Okay, Balkers, welcome to episode 21. We're starting our 5th month of doing the podcast and having a blast. So, G-Bone, how are you?
I'm great.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Jack Swagger, how are you tonight?
Doing well. Good to be back, fellas.
Okay. Low Key, how are you?
Holding up under the pressure.
Wonderful. All right, guys. Well, it's good. We're back at a quartet. Love it. Missed you last week, Jack. So let's run through the games real quick here. Sunday really kind of separated the boys from the men. Joe's Red Metal beats 47 Ronin, 48-42. That's an ass whipping, and what a great Sunday. At one point, Joe was 1-11. Again, he was at 11-22, so his team really surged at the right time and just put a beat down on 47 Ronin. Good job, Joe. So Mr. Blonde's Heroes and the Dreamers. At this point, the Dreamers are going to pull out a win. Squeak one out 34.9-34.3. The Funkin' Punks and the Street People, another close game right here. Looks like LJ has broken his streak. He ends up winning 40.9-40.2. The Omission Commission just destroys Lethal Injection 45-38. So Scotty's team continues its strong march towards the playoffs, and Lethal Injection gets beat yet again. And so you're all wondering about the brothers, the fight. Jack's Wax Packs and St. Locash. Jack's Wax Packs wins 52-45. Really sets up an amazing showdown for Week 19. Week 19 is super exciting for me. So let's run through the standings in the division, and we can take a look at that. So in the Griffey division, Jack's Wax Packs wins. He's at 14-4. 47 Ronin loses. They are now at 8-10. Funkin' Punks moves into third place with a win. They are now 7-11. Mr. Blonde's Heroes loses this week, and they fall to 6-12. The McGuire division, what a race here. Omission Commission with the win stays atop the division at 13-5. Reardon Metal with the wins is right there at 13-5, tied with Omission Commission. And the Dreamers break their own streak, and they win, and they are now 8-10. And here we are in the Bonds division. So one of these two teams will not make the playoffs after next week. We have St. Locash with the loss. They are at 9-9. Lethal Injection with the loss at 9-9. And then Bad Street with the loss at 3-15. So St. Locash and Lethal Injection. St. Locash plays Reardon Metal in Week 19. And Lethal Injection plays Bad Street. Jack, I know you've been taking a look at the playoffs, and why don't you break it down for us? What do you think? It'd be great to hear what you have.
We got, as expected, 2 divisions coming down to the wire, and Griffey's not one of them. So at the moment, we got 5 teams essentially still in it. 3 of the teams are locked into the playoffs. Myself, Joe, and Scott are all going to be in the playoffs. I have essentially locked the number 1 seed. I believe I have 20-something point lead over the other two gentlemen. So in order for them to take the 1 seed, they would have to win, I would have to lose, and they would have to score more than, I believe it's 21 points more than me. St. Locash, Chris, and Lethal Mike are tied 9-9 each. Again, the matchups this week obviously favor Mike. Matchups don't seem to matter a shitload this season. The assumption, the good money, Vegas has Mike making the playoffs, but anything can fucking happen. Chris's team has been strong. Again, just, played the wrong team, the wrong time. So one of them makes it, one of them does not. But the way we have it set up, the division winners are the 1, 2, and 3 seeds. So whoever, gets in is going to be the 3 seed, actually, ahead of a much better team making the wild card. The tiebreaker in each of these situations, because again, you literally have the same situation in the McGuire division, just 2 teams with better records, but they're tied.
So in the McGuire division, the difference is we know both are going to make the playoffs. It's just where they're
Correct.
seated. And then the Bonds division, it's literally one of these guys is in, one of these guys is out. Okay, got it.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. They both have a lot of value. So obviously in the Bonds division, the value is if you don't win, you don't get to play anymore.
Right.
In the McGuire division, the value is the team that wins the division is going to be the 2 seed and will be playing the winner of that Bonds division.
Right.
Essentially the apparent weaker of the teams making the playoffs. The team that loses, that gets the wild card, a much better record than the winner of the Bonds division, will be the 4 seed and will be playing myself, assuming again that I don't get knocked out. So a lot of value there, even though you're going either way. When it comes down to ties, should both Chris and Mike win, should both Joe and Scott lose, win, what have you, then it's going to go straight to points for the season. That's always been our tiebreaker. Essence, what we feel gives the best indication over the course of the year who the better team was. In this situation, both are within 7 points. I think Chris has Mike by 7. Joe currently has Scott by 1.5 points. So not only are these games going to come down to the wire who wins and who loses, but even if both win or if both lose, it's going to come down to points. So you may be unsure of the final situation this point next Sunday still.
Mm-hmm.
So if I understood that analysis correctly, it's assured that you're either going to be facing Joe or Scotty in the first round.
Yeah, well, that is assured. Yes, absolutely.
It's one or the other. So,
Correct.
Yep. What's the harm of saying it? Maybe there is a harm. I don't know. Who would you rather face?
Again,
I know you've thought about it.
It does. I mean,
don't say I haven't thought about it. No, I know.
I have thought about it. In what situation? Where could you have a more balanced situation? What situation could you possibly build? It doesn't matter. They're both 12-5. They're both scored 820 points each this year. In fact, oddly enough, they've both had about 765 and 769 against them this year, which is kind of odd.
You're evading the question, Senator.
I would like to beat Joe in the championship.
So you would rather play Scott?
Rather play Scott first.
Okay. Look at Jack. Well, he lives up to his nickname. I'd rather play Joe in the championship. Like he's, assured that spot.
I mean, he made some pretty aggressive moves. If he doesn't make it in the championship, then that's tough.
It this year more than ever. I agree. Yeah, I took a pretty old team and got a little older. So it's all the chips are in. It's an odd. I can't remember having 2 other teams this close. Whether I was in first or second, third. I don't remember having 3 teams that were as solid as these 3. I'm sure it's happened. The last time, should Chris be able to hold Mike off, the last time that Tim and Mike were both not in the postseason was 2010. One or the other. I made a joke, about being happy that I might get a playoffs without the 2 of them. Again, no disrespect to the other 13-5 teams that are coming in with me. But there's been a history there. So 2010 was the last time that one of the 2 of them was not in. Yeah, I did win in 2010. Yeah.
Joe, what's your perspective? I mean, how important is it to you to win the division?
Yeah, I absolutely want to win the division. And oddly enough, I can completely understand Jack's perspective on the wanting to meet me in the playoffs, I'll take that as a compliment. Whether he meant it that way, I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me. The year I won, I told Tim at the beginning, I hope I get to play you in the championship so that I can beat you. It means more to me to beat those two guys.
Yeah,
Go
no
ahead.
disrespect to Scott. Like I
Right.
said, the guy's got a solid team, but there's just been a when you look at the
Bulletin
lineup,
board material.
there's a
Oh,
little
sorry.
more surprise when you look at the at his lineup than when you look at Joe's lineup. When you look at Joe's lineup, you're like, well, they fucking should be 13-5,
Well, plus, I have the additional perspective of having been beaten by a Benigno 3 times in a row the first 3 years. It would mean even more to finally break through against Jack.
Well, I hope the other potential playoff teams have their bulletin boards clear so that they can tack these comments up to their bulletin
Hey,
boards. this
listen,
week
I
to
am under
motivate
no
the team.
illusions. I have a losing breakdown against both Scott and Jack.
I don't.
I
Either
appreciate
team
you.
is going to be tough for me to beat.
I don't know if this would be a good time to address some of the things from last week. I wasn't here, unfortunately. There were a few corrections that should probably be made.
I think what we want to do is let's just take a quick break, refresh
I'll
our
take a
drinks.
bit.
Jack, you can bring up whatever you want to bring up. I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see you in a few minutes, boys.
Hey, this is hit, pretty baby. This is hit, pretty baby. This is hit, pretty baby. Now, mess around and fall in love.
Okay, Bachers, welcome back. Jack, we were talking last week about a bragging poltergeist and the fact that we thought maybe had a poltergeist that it was inhabiting your body that had left you and went to Joe while you were gone. I don't know. How you feeling this week? You feeling good? Is the swagger back? I mean, you got Yu Darvish now with the Dodgers. It feels like you have the fantasy gods on the ropes again.
I heard Tim talking about, how nice it is to be able to relax and not stress about the season and so on and so forth. And much like my division counterparts, it really doesn't matter whether I win or lose from now until the end of the season. So I figured I'd just take off some time and relax a little bit. I went on a little vacation, put a tent up in the backyard and told my wife to leave me alone for a couple of days. So, I was relaxing. And next thing I know, I'm listening to last week's podcast, and I'm hearing things like maybe he's hiding in shame, and perhaps the gods were punishing my team, and some talk about all the old guys that were on my squad. And so, obviously, immediately I rushed to the computer because I thought, obviously something must have changed dramatically, or nope. No, I won. Yeah, I did win. Granted, the other 2 scores higher than mine were the other 2 teams that we're talking about in the playoffs, but third highest score in the league. So that wasn't it. So I went to the standings, and 13-4, still on top of the league there. Nothing changed there. So nope, still on top of the breakdown, still on top of the power poll. So I was trying to figure out what the fuck you guys were talking about last week. My team is fucking dominant. They've been dominant. They'll continue to be dominant. Whoever I use at pitching does not matter. I got the Cubs to stop them from going somewhere else, just like I did Boston, because I did lose a couple of pitchers, but I'm okay with that. As we talked about multiple times, I can afford a few weeks off. Joe, my friend, you're not supposed to take pride in the curse. When you curse somebody and you think it worked, you shut the fuck up and you let it take hold.
I'm new to it. It was my first one.
You don't brag about it. Appreciate you pointing out the playoffs had happened the last 2 weeks that I would have been knocked out, but we don't do the playoffs then. We do it soon. Again, just trying to figure out how a team that is now 14-4 and a team that I have the opportunity currently hold, still got a week to go, but would be the first ever team to finish the regular season with a full 30 across the power poll. We've had 29.5. Greg, last year. Greg, how quickly we've fallen. I'm a little confused, fellas.
Listeners, you may think that we've intentionally chosen to adopt a high school forensic competition format, the way Jack was just filibustering there. But no, in fact, we were just out of respect giving Jack some time to talk. But I will say a few things, Jack. Actually, I was somewhat in defense of you last week when, Tim was saying that you lost the swagger. Yes, I made the joke that you're hiding in shame, but that was just waiting there for me in terms of, comedic low-hanging fruit. But But I did say, how is it, Tim, that Jack was the big winner the week that he lost, but suddenly, he's fading. But now, objectively, Jack, admit it, you do have a lot of old guys in your roster.
Yeah, I definitely do have older. I will say you mentioned 3 names, and 2 of them were on my bench at the time. But I do agree. I do have an old roster. That part, let me cross that.
As for curses, I think Joe may be the guru of curse because he texted me about my team looking like a MASH unit. And since that little text, I went from having like 1 player on the DL to 6 players on the DL, and 3 of my regulars got hurt last week. I think our interest in your team was based upon the week before you were Machiavelli deciding when you would win or lose, so that you could puppeteer the matchups going into the playoffs. And I think that despite your very impressive record run, you do have some concern about who you might face in that first round.
That was not the question that was asked.
I know, but that was the answer that you gave.
You simply asked me who I prefer. You didn't ask me if I was scared of the other guy.
Oh.
That'd be like, would you like ice cream or a brownie? Well, fuck, I like them both, but I like ice cream a little bit more.
So you'd rather not have a brownie, right? Tim, of course, would like both,
and frequently have both, right? What the fuck?
Sprinkled with cheese snacks.
I love the swagger, man. I love that swag is back. However, the fact that you had to spend time building an argument defending your position kind of seems like you're compensating. Just a little. Just a little. I mean, I'm sure that was a little tough. You couldn't talk back. You're screaming at your phone like, what the fuck, guys? I get that. But it just there was just a little edge to what you were saying. But I do agree with the cursing. Like, Joe has the most cursing power, but he's really kind of clumsy in how he uses it. It's like he casts a spell. It doesn't go in the same direction, but it still works. You know what I mean?
Wait, Jack, you don't believe in luck, right? So how does a guy who doesn't believe in luck believe in curses? Isn't that just directed bad luck?
I don't, but that was the only thing I wrote down that I could yell at Joe about. I didn't want him to feel left out.
Joe, did you feel left out?
I did not. I sort of, the way they're talking about my clumsiness, I sort of feel like a giant Saint Bernard puppy or something that's trying to be house trained and failing.
It's funny, I don't know about you guys, but this season is starting to more and more look like Chris is going to come away with the goddamn championship.
Yeah, wouldn't that just be perfect?
You and Chris are like the Harbaughs.
Who's the one that wears chinos and loves milk? That's what I want to know.
I think Jack is John and Chris is Jim.
So remind me again, Jim is at Notre Dame?
Michigan. He's in Michigan.
He's
a little bit more over the top. Eccentric.
Yeah, totally.
Jack is John,
Oh, Greg, you nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
You absolutely nailed it. Both really good, right? Really know their shit.
Absolutely. The 4 of you guys should get like a timeshare in the Pocono. You and Chris and the Harbaughs do vacations together. So no one else can really understand you guys, the 4 of you. So maybe the 4 of you together would be like cool.
In a tent.
There's only one Harbaugh that Gretchen hates, though, and that's Jim. Because he was a quarterback of the Colts when they beat the Chiefs in the playoffs, and freaking Lynn Elliott couldn't hit a field goal to save his life. And then in that offseason, he brings his dogs into the vet clinic where she worked, and she had to help him with his animals.
Dude, if your wife hates everybody who's beaten the Chief, it's a lot of baggage to carry around, isn't it?
It is.
Kind of bricks.
Oh, my God.
But she doesn't forget.
Jesus.
So one thing I'm loving about the Dodgers is Puig's new celebration. You see that, guys, where he hits a home run and he kisses his batting coach? I'm like, fucking finally we get past these stupid celebrations, these bat flips and hair flips. Now we got some serious shit going on.
Making out.
I love it, man. I absolutely love it. Oh, the passion. You know what? It's about fucking time. Look, it's not full-on French kissing on the mouth, guys. Like, this is not... We're not talking about Aquaman again. We're just saying that there's some creativity going on, and I'm excited about the game kind of opening up a little this. We talk about the excitement of the World Baseball Classic, and it's just so goddamn rigid. He's feeling good. He's going to, just let me give him a kiss on the cheek. Yeah, I just love this guy so much. He told me something about this, and I'm appreciative of that. I mean, this Dodgers team is a fucking fun one to watch. I do think if this Dodgers team goes all the way, it'll be one of the most enjoyable teams that I've seen in Major League Baseball in a long time.
I have a hard time, really fully enjoying epic teams like that. I don't know. I get so bitter that it's not the Pirates. Justin and I have had this conversation before where he's a fan of baseball first and then his team's second, where it's the opposite for me. I'm a Pirates fan, but there's just a part of me that can't fully invest in the pleasure of seeing even an epic team. It just embitters me that it's not my team. Am I crazy?
It's exactly what it felt like for many years being a Red Sox fan. Joe and I have tried to explain that, right? Okay, well, let's take a quick break here. We'll come back, and I think we want to talk about, I had to put a message up on the message board talking about putting your best lineup in. I think we should probably continue to talk about this. We had a great talk kind of from a game theory perspective as to what the incentives were, and I think that we haven't fully worked that out. So we'll see you in a couple minutes, boys.
Your face, I'm affected with your love. I need some bastard tracing. Please don't kick me out on the streets, out the door. I don't want to stay on my cousin's couch no more.
Okay, Bachers, dealing with an unwritten rule that we have. We've talked a lot about unwritten rules in the past with Major League Baseball. We really have some unwritten rules in the fantasy baseball, in the Deuces League in particular. And one of them is the best lineup rule. I think the question now, should we or even could we design an enforceable rule around this? I mean, this is interesting. This is different than a zombie team when someone doesn't put in a lineup that they or anyone else believes could be the best possible team that particular week. That's more like a suicidal drone team. There was some question in the league with the Dreamers that Dusty wasn't putting in the best lineup, and it was specifically pointed out Freddie Freeman and Christian Yelich were on the bench, and Brandon Belt was actually in the game. Now, we could break down the numbers and actually say that he made a good call, but I think the deeper issue here is that were some owners that were really wondering about that. Incentives aside, I actually think that this is less about a rules violation and more about limited social interaction. So Dusty doesn't know anybody in the league. So when we talk about unwritten rules and we talk about the fact that we get together and we talk every week about the league, we're creating a community that, when you think about it, Dusty is about the farthest from the community as anybody. So then people start to lay on Dusty intentions that aren't true or may not be true.
So you have two kind of different situations that we're talking about that kind of meld into one. So that and I think everybody's gut reaction was one thing, but then it was brought up that, is he aware that this is the way we handle this situation? And you're right, it's not written. Last week you guys threw around the word integrity, and it's not an individual integrity, it's the integrity of the league, the league itself. The assumption is that everybody will make the best effort to win. The first question is whether or not he's aware. Then secondly, then we can talk about the rule itself or the non-rule, whatever you want to call it, which is that everybody puts their best foot forward, whether it benefits them next year or not.
But there's no rule created, right?
There is no rule. It's not the unwritten rule, the agreement, the
non-social norm
agreement between everybody. So that was one of my first questions, was knowing the situation with him in particular, because we've never had the issue, because it's not something that really comes up anymore in our league. It did at first. That's why it exists. That's why we talk about it, because it had happened. And like you said, it is the smart thing to do. It's the better thing for your team. The other thing I did want to bring up is, we're pretty fucking loose with it in the day. A relatable situation is what we call the Grady Sizemore rule. And back in the day, there was actual vetoing of trade. We did allow vetoing if enough people got behind it. And we used to play year to year. And once we went dynasty, it kind of changed the whole mindset of trading. Obviously, at that point, it was valuable to get Nomar Mazara this year, whether or not he's as good as the guy you traded. Once we realized that we needed to kind of back off and allow that stuff to happen, because you don't know how it's going to happen ultimately you don't know how good the younger guy is going to get, so on and so forth. It's not like people are scouring lineups saying, oh, this guy's a little bit better than that guy.
That's kind of what happened.
Well, but it really has to be a drastic move. And nobody questioned Greg pitching staff selection prior to this happening. And were there better staffs? Yes. Were they greatly better? No. And even that now is something that it was within the realm enough that it really wasn't questioned. We're
Right.
talking about a specific, even if you were just talking about Yelich, I could see not using Yelich. He just had one of the greatest weeks of an outfielder this year, but I could see if you didn't want to use him, it's not Stanton, but Freeman. Freddie Freeman, and again, Belt's doing great, but Freeman can play in 3 different fucking spots on that team now.
He can, but what if he knows that Freeman's had a wrist injury, that he's worried about the power not being there, that, when you look at Belt and Jerko, they actually scored exactly what Freeman scored. Like, my big concern here is that if we get into really legislating what we think people should do, that's when we get into trouble. If he's on the message boards going, I'm going to fucking throw the game and fuck you all, whatever, that's one thing. But everyone's kind of feeding their concerns to me as if I'm going to talk to him rather than just reaching out and telling Dusty. Everyone has his information. Dusty, what's up? Like, why didn't you do Freeman? Why didn't you put Freeman in there?
And I agree 100% that the social aspects has a lot to do. And in fact, in talking to Mike, who is the one that brought it up, and again, when he brought it up, he's just, hey man,
He still brought it up.
What's up with this guy that's he's trying to lose? And but yeah, he has no idea who this. He knows his.
But
name,
you got to be
website.
really careful with that. Let's say Tim and I were in opposite places right now. I sat Wilson Contreras, who promptly put up a 9.2 or something like that this week in favor of Posey, because I just had a feeling Posey was heating up, and Contreras only had 5 games this week. Right. So it was a logical decision from my point of view.
Right.
But if I were in that situation where it would benefit me to lose, you could easily say, well, why would, this guy's been better than Posey for a month and a half now.
No, but it's Posey. So there's certain guys that have a certain assumed value. All of it's arguable, and I agree 100%. I'm not 100% one way or the other, but this team this week, there are multiple situations where you can point and say, what about that? The Diamondbacks have been on fire, and they're on his bench again. The Mets they were supposed to be better. They, he, and then there was an injury to a position that Freeman played. And again, Freeman didn't start this yesterday. He's been doing it since he got back. He's Freddie Freeman. He got an injury, and instead of replacing him with Freeman, he moved Jerko to first base, which would anybody here use Jerko at first base in any fantasy situation?
Well, who's Jerko facing as a pitcher? What is his stats against him?
You're
Story,
right.
He brought Story off the bench. This is what I'm saying. Like, I get really concerned.
17 for the week, Story. So yeah, did he bring him in because he was due? Maybe. Listen, I agree, and that's kind of my point. Is it's something that needs to be discussed. But I'm not a big fan of riding the fence. But in this situation, I really am. I was part of the Grady Sizemore deal.
Right.
I know that it's hard to say you were doing this because of this or why. So the ultimately, all really, me personally, is that this person knows that this is how we do it, and if then he chooses to, you know what I mean. My concern is him knowing, which again comes down to the social situation. I think that we've done a great job, in especially the podcast has helped us meet each other. I've never saw Scott lie, his face before, and
right.
Mike mentioned how he had really talked to Greg or got to see Greg before. So it's done a lot, but there's still some, non-connections, and this just happens to be one of them. And I think that has a lot to do with it.
Jack, you said that my pick up the Pirates wasn't questioned until maybe today, but it was. Actually, it was brought up on last week's podcast when we were having this similar discussion of integrity. But so it is subjective, and we've never had a rule where if you had to pick somebody up off the waiver wire, you had to pick up the person who filled the positional requirements, who was currently
Right.
doing the best in the league.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Silly.
Right. And so I had a logic, and so I guess what I'm saying is that we have to allow our fellow league owners to make bad decisions. Yeah. Is it partly because I'm a Pirates fan and it makes watching the Pirates more enjoyable, knowing that they're, a part of my fantasy team? Yeah, that's true. That was part of the calculation, but I also had the baseball logic. I thought I saw a trend where the Pirates were rising, the other teams were falling, and the Rays, they're American League East, and other teams were acquiring bats. So I had my logic, and the game that we're talking about specifically, it could just be bad baseball decisions. The thing that I would object to, and the thing that I would say is worse than putting in the wrong starter or the wrong sub, is when you don't switch out somebody who's injured.
Agreed.
Yep.
That's a problem.
Yes.
And then again, I don't think that that's necessarily anybody with some malice in mind. It might just be somebody not paying close enough attention.
Sure.
But even under those circumstances, I consider myself a pretty in-tuned owner. But I clearly this year, there's been a couple of occasions where guys were game time decisions, and if I had been reviewing my starting players 10 minutes before their game time, I might have read something on the CBS website. But I didn't. I thought they were okay, and then it's 30 minutes into the game. I'm like, shit,
Yeah, well,
but
if you're dependent on CBS for your injury information, you're screwed anyway. Because Carlos Correa was day to day, and then all of a sudden he was on the 60-day DL.
It absolutely happened. I personally know for a fact I have left injured guys. This is at the beginning of the season while I was winning still, even though I had injured guys. And but no, seriously, I have absolutely done it myself. So it happens. Not everyone can pay attention every day. However, once you get into a certain situation, then I feel we get a little bit more under a microscope, and it does matter. Listen, 2 weeks ago, the team in question played Tim. Tim's out of it. He's out of it. Doesn't really matter. It matters about positioning, playoffs. This week he played you. You're out of it. He's out of it. Didn't really matter. Mattered to me. I watched. Why? Because I got your staff pick now. So now I'm rooting against you. This week, the team in question plays the omission commission. And I try to when I look at these situations, and I've always done this, try to not take myself out of it, my team out of it, even if my team's in it. I try to do that. And I think in this situation, I've been able to do that. There's I would be surprised if you called the dude and said, "Hey, are you putting your best lineup in?" And he would say, "Well, fuck no," and think it's okay, and that's cool. If that's the case, then it's on us. Then I, as the past commissioner, and Tim as the current commissioner, we need to communicate this shit so that people know it. That's what I expect, honestly. Trevor fucking Story, maybe maybe it's not the case. I don't know.
But here's what's fascinating to me. This is like, if we can loosely call what we're doing here on the podcast art, this is art imitating life, right? Because earlier we spent a couple of episodes probably talking about these unwritten rules, and we talked about Mattingly. That was what I think spawned the earlier conversation and his meltdown.
Yep.
About a guy swinging 3-0 in a 5-0 game in like the fifth inning. But we were all kind of on the side of common sense, saying, maybe Mattingly was a little bit overly sensitive in that one particular situation.
Right.
So we're here. We have a team and some owners who are zeroed in on a meaningless game. And, this isn't a new team in our league. This is a team that has years of history. And I don't recall there ever being, and again, the podcast.
It was a different ownership. This team has been under new ownership for 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks there's.
But he's been involved.
Listen, maybe it's all coincidence. I don't.
Well, are we all, or the people who were raising eyebrows about my Pirates and about the other situation?
That was only me trying to prove a point. No one else raised their eyebrow. Just so you know, that was just me trying to kind of rhetorically get at what I saw as an attempt to legislate intent.
Okay, so that's fair, but are we being are we hyper focusing on one particular game, and like we're talking 2 or 3 player decisions? We talked in that earlier baseball's unwritten rules conversation about, are those unwritten rules necessarily the right rules? But once a person's in a league, though, I mean, aren't they? Isn't it free will?
first of all, I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, the word meltdown was thrown out. There has been no meltdown. Nobody's that upset about this. In fact, when I talked to Mikey, who brought it up originally, and not even originally I mentioned to Tim that Bohr had been left in. That was 2 weeks ago,
right,
while he was injured.
And you did it in a kind of an offhanded way. It wasn't like holy shit, what's going on? I literally was looking at trades. I was looking at the teams that were out of it. Who could I pick off of their team? And then I noticed that so I brought it up originally. Mike brought it up this week with Freeman, and I had noticed that he didn't have Freeman in, but it didn't really hit me until Mike brought it. But again, even when Mike brought it up, he went out of his way to say, "Hey, listen, I know we don't force anything on anybody. I know we don't make anybody do anything, but I thought this was the case. But hey, at least the guy's replacing his hurt fucking players, and he's not just leaving them." So even Mike went out of his way to say the same thing you did, Greg, which is that's a much worse situation. Is not, at least Story has a chance to get points, and in fact, ironically, I think he's who won the game for him, or at least put him ahead of you originally. But again, Freeman would have, in a few different spots. I know at first base it would have balanced out, but there were a couple other spots he could have played also. Like I said, he only had 3 guys on his bench really after the injuries and so on. And I'm pretty sure that most of the time those 3 guys were when he was winning and on their way up.
Freeman would have been the last man up. I agree. I was playing him, and I did find it curious, and I was like, oh, good. When he put Jerko at first and left Freeman on the bench, I did find that curious, but I just thought, well, maybe that's not a good baseball decision. That's going to, favorable randomness on my part.
And again, anything is possible. Again, first one to say, but that's when. To not have Freeman in the lineup was one thing. To not take advantage of being able to put him in the lineup.
I didn't even know Jerko was eligible at first, and he was on my roster.
Right, me either. Right? Why the fuck would anyone ever use that guy at first? So that's where it kind of came. And then I said, "Well, Tim, does he know that? Like, have we? Like, I haven't told him that this is kind of how we handle things. Down the line. I know he's been in that situation. He hasn't been in the playoff, but again." Maybe it was somebody else.
So a couple of things, though. This unwritten rule is a lot more subtle than we want to talk about. Common practice. I'm out of the race. I get rid of my pitching staff if there's value. No one bats an eye. I'm running with one pitching staff. I pick up the San Diego Padres. By the way, not the best statistical team available at the time. My thinking was they play in a National League. They have a big National League park. They've got some young players coming up. Might be fun to watch them. It wasn't, are they the best possible player to put in that spot next week? But see, what I'm saying is that's a sure, right? Because it's a weird thing. So I've picked them up. Anyone that's been injured, I've replaced. Anyone that's on the DL, clearly off. It's the in-game decisions that we're talking about. But even then, I kind of threw out there a pure cold way to try to make it look like I was putting the best lineup out there, but could subtly do that. So I would put out a bunch of players that were playing 5 games instead of 7 games.
No, I'm struggling this week whether to pull Mookie Betts out. No, I wouldn't. I don't foresee myself sitting down Stan, but Mookie Betts struggled this week, and he's got 5 games next week against the Yankees and the Rays.
Well, that's what we talked about last week. That was the thrust of the conversation, Jack. When I know you heard
Tim's done a similar thing with players, for Charlie Blackmon, so on and so forth.
Yeah, but then there's and Tim just mentioned it. It's the in-game management.
Right.
That's where people are going to scrutinize and raise eyebrows about things that we may or may not do.
But at the same time, we've got that situation this week. Even if they put their best lineup in there, he should still outscore them. I should still outscore the team I'm playing.
Right.
It should happen that way. And, there's a certain amount of randomness to it, and it might not happen that way. But I'm not as concerned. I think it actually affects the race to the bottom more than it does the race to the top. I get what you're saying, too. But
right, and I don't know what the value is of that because I'm rarely down there, so you'd have to ask somebody else. But I do feel so. Check it out, Mike and Chris are in a dogfight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Chris plays who this week?
He plays me.
Right. It's not anybody would want to do that right now. Mike, on the other hand, plays his father.
So he benefits from Pop's decisions throughout the year. And are we going to say that Pop's purposely made decisions he made?
My question is, if this isn't something that we need to oversee in some way, then what's to stop Pops from making his shitty team worse just to make fucking sure that his son is not that he would do that. I'm
honestly,
saying,
Jack,
open it up.
The reality is that we could have said you put the Cubs in to give Chris an advantage. Because
you could,
if
the Cubs hadn't had a better score than both my staffs for the 2 weeks prior to that, which is the reason I put them in. But again,
they didn't this week. This is why I'm saying there's a slippery slope here. Now,
there is, yeah.
I agree. I agree
really
100%.
Goofy, and it comes down to a known versus an unknown. It's a Dusty is an unknown. Therefore, I am putting kind of nefarious motives on Dusty. But
Absolutely
we know
not.
Pops.
No, you're wrong there.
The fact that Mikey would even bring it up says that something, because has Mikey commented on Pop's trades? Has Mikey commented on Pop's moves throughout the year? Like the point is oh, well, okay then.
but
we allow it. We allow it. It's okay. It's Pops. He's eccentric. Like he cares about the other part, right? So, oh fuck. Well,
the fact that Mikey, I believe, is because of the player specifically in question. Because it's Freeman, he's a Brave. Mikey pays attention, obviously.
Sure.
But if Greg right now had Fred Freeman and was benching him, I would be questioning why that's happening. I would. Is there anybody here that's maybe Joe so good that Freddie Freeman wouldn't be in your lineup?
Actually, I would love to have Freddie Freeman.
Again, we're not talking about a player. We're talking about, like I said,
a player who had a broken bone in his wrist not long ago,
and then came back and was kicking ass.
Like if you look at the last 7 games, he wasn't kicking ass. He had a couple of home runs. I mean,
wasn't worse than Belt.
He wasn't better than Belt either.
Well, Belt in favor of Freeman. That's not egregious to me. That's maybe bad baseball. And don't forget, Dusty's a Giants fan. So there might be a illogical emotion playing into that.
Maybe he has some insight.
Well, yeah, maybe the Pirates. I mean, or faulty insight. But the only thing that did make me scratch my head was Jerko to first.
Right, and then he does have Donaldson at third, which Freeman now qualifies at. So you can justify not putting Freeman there. Beltre at DH. Again, me personally, I'm starting Freddie Freeman. I guess you could argue it, maybe add more games. I don't know. And again, Mike brought this up too. When me and Mike discussed it, the details of the situation do matter, but there are a select number of players that you just expect to be in people's lineups. And when that particular one of those players isn't in someone's lineup that will benefit from losing, my assumption is that Dusty didn't know that anyone would give a shit that he was trying to lose. I don't buy that he was trying to win. I just not with that, and especially with the move with Jericho to first and Story. That just to me didn't make sense.
But. So that's your thought, right? And
it is. It's an opinion,
absolutely right. And this is where I think, if there's any rule, the rule needs to be you need to be on the fucking podcast on Skype and see everyone's faces. Like you got to get. I mean. You got to know people, because I think to me it's social. I think it's the classic human. I don't know them, so they're not as virtuous as we are. And I hate to kind of sound like that, but that's really what it is. And
when you say it's social,
what I mean is that, look, part of this league, we've known each other since we were fucking kids. Like you've known some of the league mates since third grade, right? Like literally. Yeah. And I've known you since early 20s, right? So there's that history, right? So some of this unwritten rule stuff evolved, like you said, when we went to a dynasty format,
right?
15 years ago?
My question is, are you saying that Dusty is not in connection, so he didn't know better, or Mike is not in connection? And because, again, it's not a question. It's a question of the player. That player not starting on any lineup that's not in the playoffs would be questioned.
I think it's social because the real move should have been what we would have done. Tapped out a text. Jack, why aren't you playing Freeman? I can't believe you're not playing Freeman. But Mike didn't. Mike went to you. And it's an us versus them, as opposed to just going to Dusty and tapping out a note to Dusty. You know, Dusty, what's going on, man? Like, I love the Braves. Why aren't you playing Freeman? I'm not blaming
Maybe.
Mike or
In
Dusty.
his defense, yeah, I've been the commissioner for quite some time, but yeah, I mean, but it still doesn't. That's just the communication of the situation. It's not an explanation.
But it gets
what's happening.
It gets to the point, though. The point is that the doubt in even just asking the question, as opposed to just reaching out to Dusty and say, "What are you thinking?" And maybe Dusty's like, "I thought this league was hardcore." In the major leagues, they do. That's what they do. So if in the major leagues they do it, and this is a hardcore league, why is it a big deal? And that's why I sent the note out, because I think this is a social thing. Now, I'll talk to Dusty personally, but me talking to Dusty isn't going to resolve what I think drove the issue, which is someone wondering the intent.
Well, yeah. And here's the thing. Tanking is an accepted part of sports these days. You just had Mark Cuban on a national radio program admit they did it.
Right.
Right. But there's other, this isn't a real sport. This is a game.
I get that.
Play.
But
there's other negatives.
If you don't know that that's a rule.
Right.
If it's an unwritten rule, he's doing what, if that's what he did, he's doing it with the intent of making his team better next year.
Right.
And you can't fault him for that if we didn't tell him that that's a rule.
Correct.
Well, it's not a rule.
What Tim's saying is that
exactly.
because Mike doesn't know Dusty, that doesn't matter. It happened. If Tim was benching Freeman right now, if Greg was benching Freeman, if LJ was benching Freeman, any of them, it would have come up. There's
Correct.
no the Freeman
that's what Tim's saying.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, I haven't known you guys since childhood. I haven't known you guys a long time, and I can tell you, there was a point where I was when there was 8 teams, it was me, I knew Tim, and then 6 people I didn't know, and a bunch of friends,
Yeah.
And Jack, you'll remember when you were commissioner, I can remember you calling me when I was in Arizona and saying, "Hey, you know what? I have kind of a weird situation. Somebody wanted to make a substitution, and then they really didn't do. They didn't get in quite in time, but it's only the first inning, and that person isn't up yet." And invariably, I said yes, no problem. I rolled with it. I mean, because I'm an easygoing guy, yes. But if I had known people better, I might have been a little bit, but like, no, fuck that. No, they know the rules too late. But I was feeling some social pressure. And does it cross my mind that, especially years ago when I didn't really know anybody well, that there might be, trades or like I might not be somebody that no one's going to trade with me because they don't know me. Yeah, I think that's a legitimate happening. That I only really ever traded with Tim until the league started to expand and I got to know you guys a little bit more. And so that I can see where Tim's driving at with this. I look at, I commented on it on the earlier podcast, the trade that Mike and his dad made earlier in the year, where Mikey traded Chris Davis, I think, for Kevin Maitan. And I know that was, I know that Mikey, well, I don't know. I believe that Mikey wanted Kevin Maitan because Mikey on a previous week's podcast had said how much he liked that guy. And then strangely, Pops out of the blue was offering me Sano, who he knew I wanted, and he wanted Maitan.
Who he wanted fucking, by the way, like Harper for Sano. Just like when I would ask him, how about Harper?
And here, let me finish the story. And so I know, and when I called, Mike and I usually, Pops and I usually talk about a trade. We'll throw some ideas out there, then we'll speak on the phone. And after the trade, we spoke. We made the trade, and he was like, "Oh yeah, good trade." Blah blah blah. And I was like, "Yeah, Maitan's going to be really good." I said, "But he's so young." And I think I even talked about this on the podcast that Pops was like, well, what is he, like 20, 21? I was like, no, I think he's 17 or 18. And he was like, what? And so, I kind of brushed that off. And then a week or two later, my tan's suddenly on Mikey's team. So it's like Pops was the middleman brokering this deal for my tan. Is there a rule against that? No, there's no rule against that. And in unwritten rules, in baseball or in fantasy baseball or in life are unwritten rules, because if everybody agreed on them, or if there was a sufficient mandate socially on what the right thing to do was, they would be rules. But these are things that aren't quite rules. They're quasi rules because there's not wide agreement. And so,
right.
We can't even enforce it. It's not a rule,
No. And right. It's right. You can't say, put this guy in your lineup. You can do what Tim did today. And maybe I should have done more clearly a couple years ago and say, we all have a responsibility to the league and to the teams that are vying for playoff spots, that we put in our what we think is our best team to win. Yeah, no, you did the same with the Cubs, right?
Well, I did pick up the Brewers, and I will be starting them for our week. That was our final week of the year.
That might be the most
I'm starting
ridiculous move.
Your apologies are wasted. He wants to feel hurt by it.
I don't want to. Thank you, Joe. I don't want to have any impression that I'm, unwilling to spend or to do what I need to do to put my best.
Oh,
team
come on,
Greg.
You and I have put a fucking shit ton of money. If you look, we have put 1/3 of the money in the pot, and we're fucking going home with guaranteed nothing.
I know
nothing.
But I will have my self-respect thanks to the Brewers.
Right, so I'm so happy that I'm fucking buying, Jack's family and Joe's family nice dinners and maybe a gift for the wife. Like and here we are. We're the ones talking about our moves when probably there's a couple other motherfuckers on this call, Greg, that aren't doing things on the level, right? Because look at them. Look at the fucking size of the pot. This is the record. We broke the pot record. The money record for the league, not the pot record. It. Yeah. We broke that like fucking 3 weeks ago.
I believe it.
4 weeks ago. Yeah.
Did you guys ever see Rounders?
Yeah.
With Matt Damon.
Yeah. I saw it with Jack and Chris at Chris's house.
No, so like Jack and Chris and Mike and his dad, they're like Worm and whatever Matt Damon's name was, and they're not exactly playing against each other. I mean, they're not exactly helping each other, but they're not exactly playing against each other, right?
Mike and Mike's dad do have that. That's something that everyone's kind of known. That the My Tan situation wouldn't surprise me. Put it that way.
I wish this was a video podcast right now when I saw Greg's face.
Yeah. How's that all right?
I'm just not that they there's not collusion, but the idea of, hey, I like this guy, I like that. Like me and my brother have a much different relationship, I guess is my point. Me and Tim have a different relationship within the league than me and Joe. Is it more likely that me and Tim would make a trade, or me and Tim have worked on three-way trades and that some that haven't been offered.
That sounded way more sexy than it actually is.
Yeah, trades. So some people obviously have different relationships with, the same was assumed with you and Tim, and you just admitted it to be the case when you first came into the league.
Well, only
Tim's
because
bringing this guy into the league, obviously, him and they're going to have a different relationship than Greg and Jack have. I mean, that's just
the difference was Tim would speak to me and consider trades, and nobody else would for several years. I mean, that was the difference. I wouldn't even get responses.
Joe, my brother.
That great.
Let's do a trade.
So I guess my point is that there are a lot of unwritten rules, and that to Tim's point, there are social elements of it where it's like, well, it's these guys have been in the league forever, so there's kind of things that I probably wouldn't prefer that they work together or don't exactly work apart. But that's them. They've been in the league for a long time, so we're not gonna hyper focus on that unwritten rule, but other unwritten rules, to Tim's point, with people who are newer in the league, well, maybe we will. And maybe this is me being in the cusp of being in the newer people in the league that, there's more than one unwritten rule.
Yeah, but it's all taken into consideration, and ultimately why I was comfortable with Joe and Tim, commissioning the league is I've always been able to like I said, to separate myself, and but everything is taken into consideration. So a trade between Mike and Mike's dad is for me, I personally am going to scrutinize that trade more, look at it closer than I would a trade between LJ and Dusty. Just because I know it's Mike and Mike's dad. Not that they cheat, but they know each other better than this, better than that, same situation. So there are different relationships within. Again, everybody knows that. Everybody's aware of. Everybody is. So it isn't a situation. It's not something that Mike and Mike's dad know better. You know what I mean? Almost. At this point.
But the way you're talking about, Jack, like that's factually, everyone's like it's objectively, that's the fact that everybody, everybody's aware of it.
Everyone in this situation.
But it's all about perception too. These unwritten rules, unwritten rules in general, they're about people's perceptions. What enraged Mattingly was to that player who swung 3-0 totally different. And so there is a big element of perception in unwritten rules, hence they're unwritten. And so, yeah, but you may not know how anybody feels about the prospect of playing against people who are blood relatives, and again, there's nothing to be done about it, but it's just, Tim's point, it's a slippery slope.
Sure. And you can't say everybody knows it, because the fact that they're unwritten means only the people that were in on it when those rules were made up know about it. How many times did we run into that last year with?
No, you're right.
Like the trade
a lot
deadline.
Of that needs to be.
I texted Chris back and forth about the trade deadline comment that he made with the Tim trade or pickup or whatever it was. I kept looking through the charter going, I do not see this rule. Somebody tell me where this rule is written down so that I can make a decision. And the fact was, it was an unwritten rule.
That first of all, I just want to be clear. When I said everybody knows, what I meant were the players in each of the parts. So
yeah,
Mike, what I meant was Mike knows,
right,
if he trades with his dad, it's going to be looked at close, so on and so. So that's what I meant. Within each of these situations, the people are aware. As far as unwritten, there's unwritten rules, and then there's rules that should have been written. That's I'm guilty on the rules that should have been written for sure.
No. This is
no. I know, but as far as the unwritten rules, I honestly, over the last 3 years since I was commissioner, I just assumed, and this is my fault. I don't know why I just assumed, but I assumed Tim brought him in. Tim brought him up to speed. And that's wrong to put on Tim, because all he did was say, "Hey, this guy wants to play. Is that cool?" But now, me and Tim talked about it more than once over the last couple of days during this off season. Whether it's me and him, whether it's all of us, whether it's whatever, we need to try to get more of this down as possible, so that we don't run into these type of situations. And it can be that simple. Just put your best team out. Put your best lineup in. Whether we want to argue whether it's Freddie Freeman or not, that's a whole different situation. But as long as everybody knows it exists and says they're going to go buy it, then we're cool. If somebody says they're not, like Greg said, then that's something that I guess we as a league would address, which we've always tried to do.
Well, shit, I think we've run this podcast all the way it can go, guys. I know East Coast, it's getting close to midnight, and for us, West Coast, I guess the sun's getting ready to set, right? I can still see the sunshine outside.
Mm-hmm.
You, Greg? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I couldn't think of, as we enter our fifth month of doing this podcast, spending time with you guys every week like we do. I really appreciate and cherish this time, and thank you for making this happen.
And Tim, I've never meant this more than I'm about to say right now. Good luck this week.
Good night, fellas.
Good night, boys.
Take care, guys. Good luck, Joe. See you in a couple weeks, buddy.
I'm afraid that's going to happen. We'll see.
Adios.
Honey, I know I'm moving too fast. Walking over water, walking over stained glass. Little white sparrows overhead, fast as they fly away from here. Baby, I'd as soon be dead. All life, hillsides being torn down, losing my mind, buildings all around. Well, it's too late, it's too late, I ain't gonna wait around. Honey, I'll be gone before the nightfall. Honey, I'll be gone before the nightfall. Polish off some Valentines, chase it with some gin. 10,000 scaffolds, holding 500,000 kids. Well, I reached to grab a glowing rose, but instead I burned my hand. It was just 1,000 moths covering a light, hoping that they eat found land. Life could be a luxury if life forfeited time. 'Cause all the time's done to me is give and take what's mine. Well, it's not mine, it's not mine. I ain't gonna waste more time. Honey, I'll be gone before the nightfall. Honey, I'll be gone before the nightfall. Honey, I'll be gone before the nightfall. Oh, honey, I'll be gone before the nightfall. Oh, honey, I'll be gone before the nightfall. Oh, honey, I'll be gone before the nightfall. Honey, I'll be gone before the nightfall.
Thanks for setting me up, guys.
I can't wait for that. No, you're not set up for it because Joe hasn't commented on it. If Joe made some comment of affirmation of wanting to see that, it would happen. But I don't possess the power to curse.
I don't want to see Jack suffer.
Oh, there it is. He's going to suffer. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, it might ricochet
Thank
to
you.
the left and hit you, though.
It did already. So what the fuck?